I never thought silence could be so loud until I moved in with Marcus. It was one of those perfectly ordinary Tuesday nights, 3 months into our roommate arrangement, when I noticed his bedroom door was cracked open. Not wide open, not closed, just slightly ajar, maybe 6 inches at most. I wouldn't have thought anything of it except for one thing. Marcus always, and I mean always, slept with his door completely shut. I was lying in my own bed across the hallway, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, when I caught the sliver of light from his room cutting across the dark hallway. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant hum of traffic outside and the occasional creak of the old building settling. And that's when I heard it. Or rather, when I realized he might be hearing it, my breathing. Just the natural rhythm of air moving in and out of my lungs. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. But in the stillness of that apartment, in the space between our two rooms, it felt like the most intimate sound in the world. I held my breath for a moment, testing a theory I wasn't even sure I wanted confirmed. The silence stretched out like a held note. Then I let the air out slowly, and I swear I heard the softest shift of movement from his room. Not enough to be certain, just enough to make my heart rate pick up. Let me back up. Marcus and I met through one of those roommate finder apps that makes you fill out a questionnaire about your cleaning habits and whether you're a morning person. His profile picture showed a guy with warm brown eyes and an easy smile, sitting on what looked like a hiking trail with mountains in the background. His description was straightforward. 28, worked in graphic design, liked cooking, didn't party much, looking for someone chill to split rent with in the city. I was 26, working a soul-crushing job in marketing, and desperate to get out of my studio apartment where I could hear my neighbor's every phone conversation through the paper-thin walls. We met for coffee before signing anything. I remember being struck by how present he was, the way he actually listened when I talked, instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. He had this habit of tilting his head slightly when he was thinking, and his laugh was genuine, not performative. We talked for 2 hours about everything from our favorite childhood movies to our opinions on whether it was weird to eat cereal for dinner. By the time we left that coffee shop, I knew I wanted him as a roommate. What I didn't know was that I'd spend the next 3 months trying not to want anything more. The apartment we found together was perfect, in that imperfect way that most city apartments are. Third-floor walk-up, creaky hardwood floors, radiators that clanged like someone was hitting them with a wrench. But it had character. 2 bedrooms on opposite sides of a narrow hallway, a kitchen just big enough for both of us to cook in if we coordinated our movements, and a living room with windows that actually let in decent light. We moved in on a Saturday in September, and I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed. A fresh start. A normal, uncomplicated living situation with a cool guy who would probably become a good friend. Those first few weeks were easy. We fell into a rhythm without trying. Marcus made coffee every morning, strong and dark, and would leave a mug out for me, even though I usually stumbled out of my room an hour after he was already working at the dining table. I'd cook dinner most nights because I actually enjoyed it, and he'd do the dishes because he said it relaxed him. We'd watch movies sometimes, sit on opposite ends of the couch with our laptops, exist in the same space without it being weird. But somewhere around week 4, things started shifting, small things at first. I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. His gaze would linger just a second too long before he'd look away, a slight color rising in his cheeks. When we'd pass each other in the narrow hallway, he'd press himself against the wall a little more than necessary, like he was trying to avoid any accidental contact. And his bedroom door, which had always clicked shut firmly every night, started staying open. Just a crack at first, then a little wider. I'm not an idiot. I'm a gay man who spent enough years reading signals and trying not to see things that aren't there. But I'm also someone who's been wrong before, who's convinced himself that a straight friend's casual touch meant something it didn't, who's learned the hard way that wishful thinking is a dangerous game. So I didn't say anything. I just started noticing. I noticed that Marcus would time his showers for right after mine, and I'd hear him turn on the water while the bathroom was still steamy. I noticed he'd started wearing these soft gray sweatpants around the apartment that hung low on his hips and made it very difficult to focus on anything else. I noticed that when we watched movies now, the space between us on the couch had somehow shrunk, our shoulders almost touching, the heat of him radiating across those last few inches. And I noticed the door, always open now, every single night. On that Tuesday, 3 months in, I decided to test something. I got up from my bed, deliberately letting my footsteps sound in the hallway, and went to the kitchen for water. When I came back, I paused outside my room and glanced toward his door. The light was still on. I could see the edge of his bed, the corner of a poster on his wall. I couldn't see him, but I had this overwhelming sense that he was awake, that he was listening. I went back to my room and lay down, but I didn't pick up my phone. I just stared at the ceiling, acutely aware of my own breathing, wondering if he could really hear it from across the hall, wondering why he'd want to. My mind was racing with possibilities, with questions I didn't know how to ask. Was this what I thought it was? Was Marcus, my straight-seeming, conventionally attractive, perfectly normal roommate, keeping his door open just to hear me breathe? The thought made my chest tight, not in a bad way, in that terrifying, exhilarating way that hope feels when you've been trying not to have it. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window and the smell of coffee. When I shuffled into the kitchen, Marcus was there in those damn gray sweatpants and a faded college t-shirt, his hair sticking up in about 5 different directions. He smiled when he saw me, that easy morning smile, and gestured to the mug he'd already poured. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Morning," I managed, trying not to stare at the way his shirt rode up slightly when he reached for his own coffee. We stood there in the kitchen, in that comfortable morning silence we'd developed, and I wanted so badly to ask him about the door. Instead, I asked him what his plans were for the day. "Might hit the gym later," he said, leaning against the counter. "You?" "Laundry, probably. Exciting stuff." He laughed, and something in his eyes seemed nervous. "Hey, I was thinking, there's this new Thai place that opened down the block. Want to check it out for dinner?" My treat. It wasn't unusual for us to eat out together, but something about the way he asked, the slight uncertainty in his voice, made it feel different, made it feel like maybe it was supposed to be different. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "Sounds good." The rest of the day moved in that strange, slow-motion way that time does when you're anticipating something. I did my laundry, folding clothes with more care than they probably deserved. I cleaned my room, changed my sheets, told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just dinner with my roommate. We'd done this a dozen times before. But when 7 o'clock rolled around and I was standing in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear, I knew I was lying to myself. I changed shirts 3 times before settling on a dark blue button-down that I knew fit well, paired with jeans that were casual enough to maintain deniability. When I came out to the living room, Marcus was waiting, and he'd clearly put thought into his outfit too. Black jeans, a gray Henley that hugged his shoulders in a way that made my mouth go dry. Our eyes met, and for a second, neither of us said anything. Then he cleared his throat. "Ready?" The restaurant was small and warm, with soft lighting and the smell of basil and lemongrass in the air. We got a table in the back corner, and the waiter brought us menus and water. We ordered pad thai and green curry and spring rolls, falling into our usual easy conversation about work and the weird neighbors downstairs and a movie Marcus wanted to see. But underneath it all, there was this current of something else, this electric awareness that made every accidental brush of fingers when we reached for the shared dishes feel monumental. Halfway through dinner, after we'd both had a beer and the conversation had turned quieter, more personal, Marcus set down his fork and looked at me directly. "Can I ask you something?" My heart jumped into my throat. "Sure." He seemed to gather his courage, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of his napkin. "That first day we met, at the coffee shop, were you—" He stopped, frustrated with himself. "I'm trying to ask if you knew I was gay." The world tilted slightly. I set down my own fork very carefully. "I didn't," I said honestly. I'm gay, and I definitely didn't pick up on anything." He laughed, but it was shaky. "I'm really good at hiding it. Had a lot of practice." His eyes met mine again. "But I knew about you. I wasn't sure, but I hoped. Is that weird? I saw your profile and I just hoped. I couldn't breathe properly." "Why?" "Because you seemed like someone I wanted to know. And then I met you and you were even better than I imagined. And I thought, okay, just be his roommate, just be his friend. Don't make it weird." He ran a hand through his hair. But then we moved in together, and you'd cook dinner and laugh at my stupid jokes and walk around in the morning with your hair all messy, and I just... He trailed off, his cheeks flushed. The door, I said quietly. You keep it open. He nodded, not meeting my eyes now. I know it's creepy. I know I should stop, but I like knowing you're there. I like hearing you move around, hearing you settle in for the night. It makes me feel, I don't know, less alone, connected to you somehow. He finally looked up. I'm sorry, that's definitely crossing a line. I leave my door open too, I admitted. Have been for the past 2 weeks. I thought maybe you'd notice. His eyes widened slightly. You did? Marcus, I've been losing my mind for 2 months, trying to figure out if I was imagining things. Every time you looked at me a certain way, every time you found an excuse to be close, I'd tell myself I was being delusional, that I was seeing what I wanted to see. What do you want to see? His voice was barely above a whisper. I could have played it safe, could have laughed it off, kept things ambiguous. But sitting there in that warm restaurant with this man who'd been keeping his door open just to hear me breathe, I found a kind of courage I didn't know I had. You, I said simply. I want to see you, all of you, not just my roommate, not just my friend. I want to see what this could be if we stopped pretending we're not both feeling it. The relief that washed over his face was almost physical. He reached across the table, and I met him halfway, our fingers intertwining. His hand was warm and slightly calloused, and the simple touch sent electricity up my arm. I've wanted to do that for so long, he said, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. We finished dinner in a daze, barely tasting the food, too focused on each other. The walk home felt both endless and too short. We climbed the 3 flights of stairs to our apartment, and Marcus fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking slightly. Inside, we stood in the hallway between our 2 rooms, the space that had separated us for 3 months, suddenly feeling charged with possibility. So, he said, his voice uncertain but hopeful, do we still need 2 doors open tonight? I stepped closer, closing the distance between us, and reached up to touch his face. His skin was warm under my palm, and he leaned into the touch, his eyes closing briefly. I think, I said softly, we might only need 1 room tonight. He kissed me then, finally, his hands coming up to cup my face as he pressed his lips to mine. It was gentle at first, almost questioning, and I answered by wrapping my arms around his neck and pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, 3 months of tension and wanting pouring into it, and when we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. My room or yours? He asked against my lips. Yours, I said. I want to see what you see when you keep that door open. He laughed and took my hand, leading me into his room. It was neat and organized, so Marcus, with his desk in the corner and his bed made with military precision. But what caught my attention was the angle of the bed, positioned so that if you were lying down, you'd have a perfect view of my bedroom door across the hall. You really were listening, I said, touched and amused. Every night, he admitted, pulling me down onto the bed with him. Your breathing changes when you fall asleep. Did you know that? It gets deeper, more even. I'd lie here and listen for that change, and then I'd know you were okay, that you were resting, and I could finally relax too. I kissed him again because I didn't have words for how that made me feel. We lay there together, learning the geography of each other, taking our time, his hands in my hair, my fingers tracing the muscles of his back, the weight of him against me feeling like the most natural thing in the world. We didn't sleep much that night, too caught up in talking and touching and making up for 3 months of careful distance. He told me about growing up in a small town where being different meant being invisible, about moving to the city and still not quite knowing how to be himself. I told him about my own journey, the false starts and heartbreaks, the loneliness that had become so familiar I'd almost stopped noticing it. I noticed you the first week, he confessed, as we lay tangled together in the early morning hours. You were making pasta, and you were singing along to some song I didn't recognize, completely off-key and totally unself-conscious. And I thought, I'm in trouble. I'm absolutely in trouble. I noticed you when you brought me coffee that first Monday, I countered. You remembered that I'd take it with just a little milk, no sugar. You'd only seen me make it once. I thought, This guy pays attention. This guy sees me. I see you, he said seriously, his hand coming up to trace my jawline. I see all of you, and I want to keep seeing you if you'll let me. On one condition, I said, trying to keep a straight face. He looked nervous. What? We keep both doors open, just in case. He laughed and kissed me, and I felt it then, that sense of coming home that I'd been searching for in all the wrong places. It wasn't about the apartment or the city or even the perfectly timed coffee. It was about this person, this unexpected, wonderful person who'd been right across the hallway all along, keeping his door open and listening for the sound of my breathing in the dark. We fell asleep as the sun was coming up, wrapped around each other in his bed, both bedroom doors standing open like an invitation, like a promise. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt full of possibility, full of hope, full of all the words we'd say to each other in the days and months to come. Sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it's quiet and patient, waiting on the other side of a hallway, listening for the rhythm of your breath, hoping you'll notice the door left ajar. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave yourself open, vulnerable, and trust that the person across from you is doing the same. Marcus and I, we kept our doors open after that. Both of them. Not because we needed to hear each other breathe anymore, but because we wanted to. Because that small gesture had become our language, our way of saying, I'm here, I'm present, I'm choosing you. And every night, falling asleep in whichever room we ended up in, I think about how close I came to missing this, to dismissing those small signs, to convincing myself I was imagining things. I'm grateful I didn't. I'm grateful for every creak of that old building, every quiet night, every moment I lay awake wondering if he could hear me. Because all of it led to this, to us, to the beautiful simplicity of two people who stopped hiding and started living. The door stays open now, and so does my heart.